welcome to Dip In and Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. I'm very fortunate this morning to be sitting down with, well, actually this afternoon, I should say, the day's flying by, Vanessa White, who is a divorce and relationship coach. And as I always like to do, I hand over to the professional because then they can explain a bit more about what they do and why they do it. So good afternoon, Vanessa.
Hi, Lucy. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest on your wonderful podcast.
Oh.
I am, as Lucy said, I'm an accredited coach and I work in the area of divorce and relationships, and I have a specialism in domestic abuse. So I see clients one-to-one, and I see them anywhere on their journey, kind of when they're in relationship, but are either having issues or not sure whether they want to remain in the relationship for many different reasons, or after they've decided to end the relationship, and that could be immediately after or any stage after. And I deal with the emotional and the practical issues that come from that. I also have clients who come sometimes a long time after the end of a relationship, and they're sort of stuck. They don't know how to move forward. They don't know kind of what to do, what direction to take their lives, or they may have issues that are relating still back to their divorce or breakup. So I have a very kind of broad remit. I don't only work with survivors of domestic abuse, but unfortunately, that is a lot of the work that I see. And it is something that I'm very, very passionate about because I have my own lived experiences of domestic abuse. And so raising awareness, informing, educating, and most importantly, helping people to come out of those sort of relationships safely and find the life that they want is really, really important to me.
Oh, I couldn't have said it any better. I think you've summed it up a lot better than I could. And I think doing what you do is incredible because, you know, being a coach or being an accredited coach to begin with, you know, you're working with a lot of very difficult situations, add domestic abuse to that as well. And it's a whole other story, isn't it? And I think something you just said then that's really important. And one of the reasons I personally focus on post-separation abuse whenever I'm doing any work myself is because there is no time limit, there is no expiration date as to when you will feel like you either need to access support or that you even realize you need that support. You might think that actually it's been a long time, I should be okay by now. And it can take a number of things to put you in a position where you think, actually, no, I really do need to go and get some support over this because I haven't managed to process it all yet. Yeah, absolutely.
I think post-separation abuse is something that is really not discussed enough at the moment. And I mean, you know, having said that, I think it's been a long time before we've actually been discussing domestic abuse full stop enough, because my relationship ended kind of nearly 10 years ago and there wasn't really any discussion about it publicly. It was still very much something you didn't talk about. And so that has changed dramatically, which is a good thing. But I think then there are sort of elements within that big umbrella that we still don't really shine a light on. And I think post-separation abuse is one of those, actually, Lucy. And, you know, the number of clients who come who say, you know, they thought it would end the day that kind of they lived in separate houses, or they filed for divorce, or, you know, even years later. And that feeling that how, you know, we're not together anymore and yet the abuse continues. I think that element is actually very, very hard for people to accept and then kind of find a way through to feeling better and feeling like they can properly disassociate from their ex-partner. And it's certainly something that I have a lot of personal experience of. And it is incredibly difficult, I think, when you think it's all going to end once you sever the relationship and it doesn't.
No. And, you know, I think, number one, thank you for obviously explaining a bit about your own experience, because I think it's very, very difficult to do that. But I also find that a lot of the time, professionals who have had that experience and can disassociate when they're working with people, but also have the experience themselves, are probably the best people to be speaking to, because, you know, they know, and they're not ever going to say to you, I don't believe you, or, you know, what you've just said is, I used to work with some people within the charity I work for, and they would say, you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. And I would always say, you know, try me, because you just don't know, do you? You never know. And because domestic abuse and post-separation abuse, it's so insidious, and things are done in such a way as to manipulate you. And you've just said it then about the, you know, filing for divorce. Somebody may think to themselves, this is it. You know, once I get that piece of paper, I feel like I'm free almost. And then the abuse continues via different methods. And, you know, psychologically, that's a huge thing to deal with on a daily basis. And if you haven't got support, and if you haven't sort of been out and sought any kind of support or help, it's not a nice place to be, is it, at all?
No, and I think, you know, having said that, I don't want that to kind of put people off who are listening in a relationship and are sort of wanting to end a relationship and thinking, oh my goodness, well, listening to that, I don't want to, because
Yeah.
you know, it's not about that. It's, for me, it's very much, if we get clarity and we understand kind of what goes on and how things may be,
Yeah.
it actually helps us get some power. It's the not knowing that this might happen, that the abuse may not end the day you leave the relationship. You know, although that might be terrifying to some people, actually knowing that that is a likelihood actually helps you then do something about it, get the support, put things in place beforehand. You know, so I don't want that to kind of put people off thinking, well, there's no point leaving then, because there absolutely is.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we have to be realistic, don't we? And I think that's part of it, is that being realistic about situations, but also knowing that if you are concerned in any way in a relationship you're in, is that you can seek support whilst you're in the relationship. And again, you know, I've worked with people who've actually said that, you know, I want to talk about it, I'm in the relationship, but I don't know what to do, and I don't know where to turn. And I think that's a big part, is making sure that we have all those support services, having all those resources out there for people to realize that you can, you know, talk about it, and there are safe ways to leave. And it's down to each person individually, isn't it, very much, in terms as to how they want to approach the situation. Because again, if you have children, you know, there's all those kind of things to consider. And I think once you do have that support, and once you do know that there are people there that are able to, you know, help in the best way they can, then you do feel like there's that chink of light, you know, there's that bit of hope. And from then, things start to slowly improve. And I think that's, you know, because the abuse may have gone on for a long period of time, you know, to you, that's your normal. So for some people, you'll find they'll say, but I didn't realize it was abuse. You know, they didn't hit me, therefore it wasn't abuse. And that crops up, I think, quite frequently, doesn't it, when people are talking about abuse? They associate it with the physical, whereas actually, you know, there's very much the financial, the emotional, the psychological, you know, the list goes on. And that's what makes it so kind of maybe difficult for society to understand. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I mean, it does to me, because I was in a relationship where there was no physical abuse, and the sort of the other types of abuse, coercive control, emotional, psychological, financial, I mean, were all sort of part of it. And I was in that relationship for a very, very, very long time. And for most of it, I had no idea it was domestic abuse. And it actually took a medical professional who witnessed some behaviour to actually talk to me about the situation I was living in. And I'm very, very grateful to that person, because once they were talking to me about it, I then started researching it, and I could tick everything off those lists of like signs you're in an abusive relationship. And that actual realization, I suppose, was twofold. One, it was a relief
Yeah.
that there was sort of a label that I could think, yeah, that is me. And it's not just me going mad or thinking this is how relationships are, or, but at the other side of it is actual real shock that I am in that sort of relationship. And, then you get sort of, well, speak for myself, guilt because I had children. And then you're like, gosh, I thought I was doing the right thing by remaining in the relationship and things like that. So I think, for people who maybe don't realize what they're living in, and then it gets sort of highlighted to them in some way, or they start reading about it and start thinking maybe they are, I think it's very much understandable to feel that, thank God I know what this is and I'm not on my own. But also then those feelings of shock, maybe guilt, and huge sadness, actually, that's what you're in. And then fear of like, well, how on earth do I get out of it? It's one thing knowing I'm in it, but then what the hell do I do to get out of it? And I think all those feelings are very, very natural.
Yeah. Oh God. Again, you've summed it up perfectly there. And I think, when we talk about it, not many people say what you've just said about the sadness. And, this is why we do need to be talking about it more, because many people would say, well, how could you be sad about leaving somebody that abused you? But for you, that was your reality. You've given everything to the relationship. The victim, the survivor, whatever anybody wants to call themselves, they've given everything. And yet they haven't received that back from the perpetrator. So for the victim survivor, they feel as though it was a relationship. And even though it wasn't real in the sense of what we call a healthy relationship and love, to that person, they gave everything. So there is a sadness, there is a grieving process, I think, to a point where you did try your best, or you did give it your all. And I think for a lot of people, sometimes I think they feel very much as though it's, but what else could I have done? Is there something else I could have done? And very much the blame and the shame is placed on that victim or survivor. And that's something else I think we need to change, don't we? That kind of societal, well, why did you stay? Why didn't you leave? All these kind of questions. And we need to stop blaming victims and survivors and actually try to understand, as you just brilliantly put it, all the different emotions that are going on whilst you're going through that process. And it's a process that can take time. I know I've had people come back in and they've been re-referred back in for support because it wasn't the right time for them at that moment to come and maybe do some group work. But the point is, as long as they know, I suppose, that there are people out there like yourself who want to help, who do understand, then that for me is where we're going to start making the difference, because there is support. And as desperate as you may feel, there will be somebody out there for you that you will connect with and go, right, okay, they do understand. And again, it's building trust, isn't it? Because you've lost a lot of that trust. You may have lost a lot of friendships along the way. I was doing an episode with Ruth Dodsworth recently, and she was talking about friendships and the people that kind of are removed from your life, because that's a huge part of it, isn't it? That isolation from your family, from your friends, because the perpetrator wants to keep that power and control. So I think, there is a really good point to make about that sadness, because many people wouldn't pick up on that and go, but why would you be sad? But you imagine being with somebody for, maybe for some people, especially if you've been with them for maybe 40, 50 years, you've got great grandchildren, you've got, it's a huge part of your life. And I think it's something that you can only take one step at a time, can't you, really?
I think you're so right, Lucy. I mean, there are so many layers and facets to talk about around all of this, and kind of the emotional side. It's so complex, actually. People think it's very black and white. Well, you're in an abusive relationship, so just get out. But it is not like that at all. And I think, as a sort of survivor, you have, and I hear this from my clients too, you have so many emotions. And I think, there's sadness, for some people, they really think they still love that partner.
Yes.
But there's sadness, for people who've been in a relationship for many, many years, there's also an element of sadness about, a lot of my life has gone. living in that relationship. And I think that's something that actually is quite difficult to come to terms with on it. And I think unless you've maybe been in that sort of relationship, it's quite hard to understand that element of it. So that, you know, if you've been in a relationship with somebody for 20 years, 10 years, 50 years, and it's been abusive and you've been really unhappy, lonely for most of that time, you know, actually then coming out and thinking, you know, a lot of that life has gone.
Yeah.
I've lived 20 years in this situation and I've lost essentially 20 years. And I think there's a sadness there that is something that's not really talked about either.
See, you're just knocking them out of the park, because again, it's another one that, you know, I often will talk to people about, and what I really find, well, I find it heartbreaking, to be honest, is when people feel like they've almost failed themselves. You know, it's I've wasted all this time, I've wasted all these years of my life, and I think, you know, that doesn't get talked about enough. You know, that is a huge element of abuse, post-separation abuse, all aspects of abuse, of domestic abuse, because it is that part. You know, you may have stayed for a number of reasons, and again, you know, we don't talk about enough, what if you can't financially leave? You know, what if there's no way for you to leave financially? What if there's a, you know, you could be caring for the person? There's so many things that are those complexities. But I think, yeah, I think you're 100% right, that feeling like you're a failure when you're not a failure at all. You know, you're an incredible human being that has managed to sustain through horrific circumstances and are still standing, you know. So if we look at it from that angle, for people to say, actually, I think you're incredible, I don't think you're a failure at all. And, you know, you've got the rest, you can make the best of what is the rest of your life. Is that saying, I think it's I'm going to make the rest of my life the best of my life. And it is a difficult, I think that's one of the hardest things, very much so, to process, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be very careful, don't we, about, you know, language that we use around this, because for me, I mean, there's absolutely very, very clear, you know, anyone who is in a domestic abuse situation right now listening to this, or maybe in the future, or has got out of one, it is never your fault,
No.
ever. And I think we have to be very, very clear about that. No matter what the situation, it is never your fault. And I think, you know, there are so many things. I think I see a lot of clients who do feel that, sort of looking back and thinking, well, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? I should have done that. You know, a lot of kind of quite regretful, and almost they have a lot of shame about maybe how they think they should have behaved and they didn't. And I think we have to be really compassionate, actually. And, you know, looking back at that person in the relationship, you know, they were in that was their situation. It is not their fault. And actually, they are a part of you. And that sort of fragile, vulnerable part of you is a really important part, got you to where you are today. And I think we have to really try and show compassion for those elements of ourselves that, you know, we sort of recognise from when we were in an abusive relationship.
Yeah. Oh God, yes, exactly. Compassion is, for me, and I think because we had a chat a while ago, didn't we, before recording this episode, and that word came up then, and that really made me think that that's it. That's all any of us need, is to have compassion for ourselves, compassion for others, especially around domestic abuse, because, like you say, it is never that person's fault, never. And every situation is unique to that individual. So nobody's in any position to judge somebody else for how they handled a situation. And the shame and the blame has to stop. You know, we need to move away from that and stop putting it back on. You know, they've had enough shame and blame for long enough. They now should be saying, actually, I'm going to embrace who I am. I'm going to be compassionate with myself. And I think I did a blog a while ago talking about there will be good days and there will be bad days, just as there would be for anybody in the world. You know, we all have good days, we all have bad days. But the fact is, you know, you survive your bad days, you get through those bad days, and you know that you're still there. And actually, most people, I think, who've experienced abuse and are kind of on that journey, and moving forward will say, I can't believe where I am now from where I was. And that, to me, that's when you get that little kind of butterfly for them, don't you? Going, well, exactly, it can get better, and it will get better. And you need to, not feel ashamed. And that's another thing as well. I think being not only ashamed of yourself, but being ashamed to look for support. Because many times people say it's too daunting to pick up the phone, or it's too daunting to go online, and maybe they can't. If they're still in the relationship, they may find it difficult. Even if they ask a friend, could you have a look at this website for me, or whatever it takes to maybe kind of get a bit of that information, over to you, sort of thing. I think, we need to work on that as well, how we can make support seem more accessible and not so daunting, because there'll be so many questions people ask when they pick up the phone or go online and say, well, will they know I've contacted you? Or, all that, those sorts of concerns and worries. And I think we need to be clear that anything you say is confidential, and it's so important, I think, that people, because you've been controlled for so long, you may think, well, this person's going to find out regardless of what you say, they're going to know. And that's, do you know what I'm trying to say? It's trying to get that message across, that it may be daunting, but you can actually find that support, and you will be safe in those hands.
Yeah. I think obviously safety when you're talking about domestic abuse is obviously crucial. And, certainly if people are trying to leave a relationship, then obviously safety is absolutely paramount. And, for me, as in my role as a divorce coach, there are other safeguarding sort of advice that I would give to people who are in a domestic abusive relationship, before leaving, if they come and see me then, because, there are things that I would recommend that are put in place before they just up and leave, unless obviously they're in imminent risk, which is obviously a different kettle of fish. But and so I think going to experts who actually know what they're talking about and understand, and there's all sorts of things that, certainly from my perspective, everything is confidential, within the usual parameters of safeguarding. And I very much work for how my clients want to take things forward. So if it's easier for me to contact them at a specified time rather than them finding it difficult to contact me. Some of my clients want to be out of the house. I see people on Zoom. I also see in person. I try and do what my clients obviously want in any case. And I think that sort of fear of, like you said, picking up the phone can be really immense. And it can be a good idea. I do have actually friends or relatives of potential clients, and that's actually not even people who are in abusive relationships, who contact me first, because people find it really difficult to actually say in words what is going on for them, because sometimes that just makes it real, and it can be so hard just to say, I'm struggling and can you help me with this? And so I think that should never, ever be underestimated. Somebody who, maybe wants to speak up or say something, it's so, so difficult, which is why, we have to, as friends and relatives, also be there to kind of listen, and not judge, and try and be supportive where we can, even if we don't really know what to do to be supportive in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the reasons I started doing this was to make it that bit more accessible. It may be that friends and family can watch and go, okay, well, I don't understand it because I've not experienced it, but maybe I can pick something up from this in a way that isn't intimidating. And the thing is, we'll always be honest. As professionals, you have to be honest, but you can also be hopeful as well. You can be hopeful and say, yes, it may be difficult, but there is hope. We have to.
I think yeah, sorry, Lucy. I think that's very true. For me, I mean, it's a long time ago, and when I first sort of realised I was in an abusive relationship, it's sort of probably about 12 years ago or something. So there weren't any podcasts like this. There was not really Instagram. There wasn't kind of even websites about domestic abuse and help. There really wasn't anything. And that's one of the things that I kind of found my way. And that's one of the reasons I do what I do today, because I actually want to give other people the tools that I used for myself to help them move forward. And that's really important to me. So I think we're fortunate today in that there are more resources out there for people, even just for information, than there were. But I think also it is incredibly difficult, even with those resources, to kind of navigate a path through this. And, you know, I have a lot of people who come to me after the event, you know, maybe they are out of their relationship, but they don't know how to have a healthy relationship. They don't know what that looks like, you know, and so another big sort of thing for me is actually helping people generally understand what a healthy relationship is and how we can have one, because I think that sort of information is very, very useful for everybody, actually. But if you've been in a toxic or abusive relationship, it's even more so. And because people don't want to get into another one, and they don't want to repeat patterns that they see maybe they've repeated before. So I think looking at, you know, if I look at myself now and I look at myself 25 years ago, the big difference I see is my value that I place on myself, my self-belief, which I look back those years ago and I just didn't have any. I didn't know my worth. I didn't value myself. I didn't respect myself. And I don't mean as in it's then my fault that I ended up in a relationship that I did, because I don't feel that at all. But the difference between me now is that I do value myself. I do know my worth. I do respect myself. And actually, I really work hard to build all those elements up in my clients so that they can go out and they are much better then at looking for potential relationships and understanding that they're not going to put up with behaviour because they are strong enough to get out or put boundaries up, things like that.
Yeah, because you know that's so true. It isn't necessarily for a lot of people the end of the story, if you like, when that relationship has ended. Yes, they may need to take time. Yes, they may need to, you know, work on themselves, work on their self-worth, their self-esteem, boundaries, all those things that, you know, we try and, well, I do with my daughter, we try and teach our children those sorts of things, do we? And maybe more so for me with a daughter, I do feel it's important that she knows her self-worth, she knows that she can have boundaries. But especially if you've experienced abuse, then if you do potentially, you know, meet somebody, and I think again, this isn't something that's talked about enough, is that person then is already kind of almost on the back foot a bit, waiting maybe for it to go wrong, waiting for this person to show their true colours or whatever it is. And this person could be actually genuinely a lovely individual, but you've got to kind of you've got to accept maybe in yourself that you are allowed to question. You know, you are allowed to say, actually, I'm just going to take my time. And if the person is worth it and they are, you know, worth your time as well, then they will understand that. And if you feel safe enough at any point, however it is in the relationship, I would imagine that you do feel safe enough to maybe open up about some things and talk about it, but you don't have to straight away. You know, this is the reason you do what you do, isn't it? It's amazing that people can have a healthy relationship, but you are allowed to sort of say, well, actually, I'm just going to take my time with this.
Yeah, I think in my experience, I think most people, even if they've had the most acrimonious divorce or they have been in an abusive relationship in the past, most people do want to find love again. I think there's very, very few that don't. But some people don't even go down that route because they don't know how to go about it. So it is a big part of my job as well. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, for me, the thing is take things slowly, and that doesn't just mean about, you know, don't get intimate with someone too quickly. It's more about we need to take time to really get to know the person that's in front of us. And if we rush kind of emotionally and sort of, you know, build this big future when we've only just met somebody, we're not allowing ourselves to really get to know that person. And I would say that is the biggest thing, because as you sort of get to know this person slowly and you take it steadily, you will spot red flags. You will recognize feelings in yourself that maybe don't feel so good. And you're giving yourself the time to process that and think, okay, this doesn't feel great to me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just going to either be alert to it or I'm actually going to get out because I don't like this. And that speed at which we go into things, I think, is really, really crucial. Putting up boundaries and kind of valuing ourselves and understanding the behavior that to us is acceptable and the behavior that is non-negotiable, not acceptable, and that we will not even enter into a relationship with someone who shows us that. And I think if we can build confidence in ourselves to be in that position and then learn to really trust ourselves, I think it puts you in a much better position to try and find a relationship, because there are lots of good people out there. Not everyone is abusive, not everyone is toxic, not everyone is manipulative. You know, we only have to look at the men and women around us to see there are lots of examples in our lives of really good men and women. So it's not true to say everyone's awful, everyone's, you know, not good in relationships. That's just not true. But we need to allow the time to really get to know the person who's sitting in front of us.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, and not to feel ashamed again about that, because you have every right to take your time. And maybe as well, if you are in that situation and you have children as well. So you're not just thinking about yourself and your own boundaries, you're thinking about your children as well, and the impact on them with the new relationship. Because I think, I mean, you'll know better than me, you're the divorce coach, but even if domestic abuse wasn't present in a relationship, children being involved in, you know, a whole new kind of mom and somebody else or dad and somebody else relationship, that's a lot to process, isn't it? And again, add to that, if children have experienced or witnessed abuse, and then either parent or both parents end up in new relationships, it's a lot for them. So this is where the complexities come in again, isn't it? It's a lot to process, and it's a very difficult line to tread, I think, and knowing what decisions to make. And I think that's really important. Like you say, if you do take it slowly, then you are more likely to have that time, see if it is something you want to consider, you know, continuing to see this person. My dad used to have, being northerners as we are, he used to have a brilliant saying when I was younger about any boyfriends, and he used to say, "Don't tell me, show me." And I used to love that. He said, people can say anything, but their actions will show you their true intentions. And yeah, that one stuck with me all my life, I have to say.
I think you're right. I mean, consistent actions and words over time is something I talk about a lot, because that's what you kind of want to see going forward. And you've mentioned children there, Lucy. I mean, there's so much. Could be a whole nother kind of episode about children, because
Yeah.
you know, I do a lot of work with clients about children in or out of toxic situations. You know, parenting with an ex is a minefield in itself, or it can be. And I think, you know, there are different types of parenting situations. The one probably most people hear about is co-parenting, you know, where you have a sort of parenting plan and the children go between both parents. And that is usually in healthy kind of situations. It's not really advisable for people who are dealing with an abusive ex. We would more look at something called parallel parenting then, where the parents need less interaction with each other, which obviously, if there's post-separation abuse, that can be very beneficial. And you know, the children still have a relationship with both parents, but the parents are less involved with what goes on in terms of the routine at each other's houses. So I think, you know, that is important to kind of, not a lot of people know about parallel parenting, and parenting with an abusive ex is incredibly challenging. And I think, you know, for the parent, the survivor of abuse, but also obviously for the children, because the children are in the center of everything. The impact on children is, you know, immense, actually. And I think, again, you know, people say, oh, well, there was no physical abuse, so they didn't really know about it. That is just not true. That is just not the case. You know, children do pick up on everything. They witness it. They see what language is used, how the parent is treated, and it can have huge repercussions on them. But again, coming out of a relationship, it doesn't have to damage the child forever.
No.
Again, get help if needed, but also the way you then parent and show them an example once you're out of the relationship is what they need to see. So, you can have a perfect development of a child with one healthy parent. So I think that's really important for people to realise.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think if you are the parent that is, for example, if you're seeking support, so either somebody like yourself or domestic abuse, charity support service, whoever they are, if you're accessing that support for yourself, you're going to be better equipped to support the children because you're getting the help you need and the understanding and processing of it all. And you will then be in a better position to understand what your child or your children need. And also that there are organisations that work with children as well. Lots of, as they say, C.I.P, children and young persons, support out there, groups. So again, maybe sometimes with the groups, children feel a bit more as though, well, actually, it's not just me. Again, as an adult would feel, oh, so I'm not the only person that's experienced this. And children can maybe feel then that they're not alone. And again, this is all out there. This is all, people like yourselves, you're out there ready and willing and waiting to help people. And that's what I love. And that's why I think it's so important to get these messages out there, because the second we start to look for support, the second we take that first step, it's on that road to moving forward and changing your life beyond words, all for the better.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I love what I do, and I love helping people and supporting. And my job is very much about, it's not all doom and gloom on any level. People sort of say to me, well, you're dealing with people who are splitting up all the time or divorcing, or you're dealing with, high emotion or abusive relationships, things like that. But for me, it's all kind of positive because my job is very much about moving forward, even if it's in tiny, tiny steps.
Yeah.
It's always with a kind of forward trajectory. We're not sort of looking at sort of staying where we are and also living in the past. It's about how can we move forward in whatever way the client wants to.
Yeah.
And I think that is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've just given me the name of this episode is going to be moving forward, because that's what that is literally the answer. That is the answer, because staying where you are, my husband has this saying, and I used to think it was bonkers. He always says, nothing changes if nothing changes. And it sounds so simple. And over years, I've kind of gone, that makes so much, in so many different situations, I thought that makes so much sense. And we can take it, like you say, it might seem like the smallest little thing in terms of maybe how you communicate with the perpetrator. That could be something that may seem, like a little step to you. It's actually a really positive step. How you deal with things like that will then lead on to how you then communicate in the future. And if it is, parallel parenting, I haven't heard of that. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's something that, maybe people need to know more about so that they can work on that, because it is very difficult communicating if you're having to deal with somebody that is very manipulative, very coercive. And yeah, putting those kind of boundaries in place as to how you communicate will make the difference. And it's all about helping that individual, isn't it, to have a happier, healthier life.
I think it is. No client of mine is the same. Even if you lined them all up and said, oh, they're all domestic abuse survivors or they're all getting divorced or whatever, they are never the same. And I think, communication is absolutely critical because, I could spend sessions, sometimes clients want we sort of role play communication with they're going to have with their ex-partner. And it sounds very kind of trivial in a way, but actually doing that preparation, particularly if it's an abusive ex-partner, but it's not always about abusive ex-partners, that sort of role play of discussion so they can get their words, so they understand what they're going to think about. And I can, I'm very good at playing a devil's advocate.
We
Horrible
need
ex.
people like you. That's what we need. We can't all be, la la la.
I know all the games and all the responses.
Yeah, you're
So
perfect.
I'm very good at, making it kind of difficult, because then they can really practice, and actually it's really helpful. And they go
Real.
away and have those conversations in real life, and they're like, I couldn't believe how helpful it was, doing that. So there are lots of different ways I work with clients, because it's all about empowerment. It's all about actually making people feel they can do things, they can make things better, they can communicate, they are in control. Because that is the one thing, whether you're, not in an abusive relationship or you are, that feeling of loss of our own control is so massive. And actually, if I can help people bring back in some ways that, no, I am in control of myself now, I can say what I want to say, because for many years, some people have never had that.
Yeah.
And actually, that is huge and really empowering for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first time that something works like that, where you go, like you say, practicing the communication, because you're having to sort of think about all the things that that person is going to come back with, all the different things the perpetrator, and sometimes they'll come back with things that you wouldn't imagine in a million years. But if you can prepare yourself and be in, a little bit, it's taking the control back, isn't it? You're no longer allowing the perpetrator to have all the power and control. You're saying, actually, I'm taking power back. And I think once those little moments happen, those little moments turn into more and more and more, and it gets, and it, in a good way, snowballs, because then it's you realizing, actually, look how far I've come. You might feel like you're climbing a mountain, but you look back and you think, oh my God, look how much I've achieved. Look how much I've progressed over those years, months, however long it is. And I think for those moments, people should be patting themselves on the back, saying, actually, I am incredible. Like I said, I was saying, you're incredible. They're incredible human beings, and
Yeah,
take those
I
moments.
think I think that's so, so true. I think I would also add that, it's not actually about never feeling those feelings before, never getting triggered by things, never, I talk about in my own case, kind of the old me kind of behaviors, or the old feelings that I used to have about myself or about situations. Of course, they still come up. You
Yeah,
still feel those things. I'll suddenly have a lot of self-doubt, or I'll really kind of be really anxious or frightened by certain things. But the difference now is that I'm aware of it. I recognize the
awareness.
feelings and I don't ignore them. If I get feelings where I'm walking on eggshells in certain situations, I recognize that and I'm like, okay, Vanessa, why am I feeling like this? What is going on here that
Yeah,
is making me feel like this? And then you can kind of usually pinpoint what it is, and you can then make a choice. I can think, okay, there's this person who I don't particularly like the way they're behaving towards me, and I don't have to be around them, or I manage the way I am around them.
yeah,
And I think that is what the power is actually. So it's not you never feel those things again, or you never slip back into sort of doubt or nervousness, but we know what to do with it and we know how to safeguard ourselves. And I think that's really, really critical.
yeah, definitely, absolutely. Knowing that, like you say, it's what I will often say as well is it is part of who you are. Years ago, I remember saying, when I was having a conversation in a meeting around the word recovery, and lots of people use that word, but many people I've worked with don't like the word recover, because it makes it sound like they've had a cold, and you're going to recover. And it's actually something that does, like you say, you will have feelings and emotions that you remember from when you were in that relationship, the self-doubt, the lack of self-worth. But working on all those things will help you, as you say, putting all those tools in place will help you then say, actually, now I can pinpoint why I feel like that, because I've just received such an email, whatever it would be. um, and it will stay with you, but it doesn't have to define who you are. You can access those feelings and say, okay, and I'll access them and I'll assess them and I'll say, okay, right, now I know why I feel like that. Now I can go forward and deal with it. And I think that, to me, is the best way anyone can move forward. In all honesty.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I think it is important, because it's that awareness, and that's part of the thing of raising awareness about domestic abuse, because it's the knowing either about our self-awareness or about awareness of abuse and sort of toxic relationships and what happens, that enables it to come out of the shadows, enables us to be the person we really want to be going forward. And everybody deserves that. Everybody deserves a chance to really shine and really live the life that they want to live. And that's not about sort of necessarily grand sort of aspirations. Most people I talk to who have been in an abusive relationship, when you sort of say what they want just to be happy. They want to feel peace. They want people to be kind to them. Very, what I would call base level, expectations we should have actually for anybody. But that, you're not talking about they want £1 million in the bank and, a villa in Barbados, although that would be the ideal.
We'll say no.
I mean, I'm not going to say no, but it's not about that. And I think that puts it in perspective. When people say, what do I want from my new relationship? It's like for them to be kind to me. Come on. That is what we should just generally expect
Basic
from
humanity.
humans.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that kind of puts it on the level, I think. And I think, everybody deserves that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think we do need to do a whole other episode, and we need to do probably a whole series, because we couldn't cover it all. I thought this is going to be a challenge for us to cover everything in 40 minutes, because I think
not with me in the way
we
I
got
talk.
going, there's so much, and I love it because it is that kind of, you do see things from all the perspectives, and that's what's so fantastic. And I think that's why you're so good at what you do. 100%.
Oh, thanks, Lucy. That's lovely. Well, I mean, I love what I do, and I'm there to help people. So, yes, it's very important to me.
Yeah, you're amazing, and thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you.
That's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's honestly my pleasure.
Oh, I know we'll do another one, definitely.
Yeah, that would be really lovely. I'd love it.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Where